Yesterday, while Irish Catholics gathered on the Hill of Slane to relight the fire that apparently went out in Ireland and to hopefully bring back the faith, praise be to God, Conor McGregor of Irish fame was at the White House, really not talking about St. Patrick at all. Have a listen.
And it's high time that America is made aware of what is going on in Ireland. What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. You know?
So the question is, can Ireland be saved?
The negative, obviously, is fairly widespread apostasy. A lot of the Irish have left the faith. I've never been, the biggest Conor McGregor fan, but, it is great to see somebody with that kind of platform and that kind of, social clout really bringing attention to these issues, because he's absolutely right. The immigration issue in particular.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Well, yesterday, Conor McGregor was at the White House trying to raise awareness of what's going on in Ireland. I was reminded by my good friend Rudy Carlos of the Magnificat Scriptorium YouTube channel of just how beautiful and wonderful Ireland used to be. Have a listen.
For almost 3 centuries after the death of our holy apostle, the Church of Ireland towered on the western borders of Europe as a pillar of celestial fire, diffusing its heat on every side and flinging its light back to the very gates of Rome, the portals of the sanctuary from which the spark had been originally borrowed.
Ireland, what has happened to you? Over at the Washington Stand, Sam McCarthy has written an article, 4 things that might surprise you about modern day Ireland. And spoiler alert, he's a glass half full guy. It seems like he's ending on a hopeful note here. He joins us this morning to talk about it. Sam, good morning to you.
Joe, thanks very much for having me on. It's great to be talking with you again.
Praise be to God. Now, for transparency purposes, you live in Ireland, right? I mean, like, you're there now.
That's correct. I live in Ireland. I live in County Clare, which is on Ireland's west coast, kind of southwest point, Midwest, Southwest. And I've been here for about 2 years.
Okay, so what is it like in Ireland these days, especially in terms of the faith?
In terms of the faith, I'd say that there's positives and negatives. The negative, obviously, is the fairly widespread apostasy. A lot of the Irish have left the faith. There's a survey that I actually cited in that article that you referenced. This was back in 2023. I don't think that there's more recent numbers available for this, but only about 14% of those who self-identify as Catholic in Ireland actually attend Sunday Mass regularly.
Wow.
14%. Now, granted, almost 70% of the population still self-identifies as Catholic, but it's largely a cultural thing. Especially in the early 20th century, there became kind of a conflation between Irish nationalism and Catholicism, and so when a lot of Irish refer to themselves as Irish Catholics, they typically mean they're from the Republic of Ireland, or they would support the Republic. As opposed to British rule over Ireland. So there's been kind of a conflation that's kind of muddied the waters in political terms. But there is hope in as much as the faith that is here is very strong. My wife and I, we attend the traditional Latin Mass at Sacred Heart in Limerick, which is run by the Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest. That's where we got married. That's where our baby girl was baptized. It's a wonderful community, and the priests are very busy. They have 3 canons there, and they travel all across the country. They go to Galway, they go to Cork, they have a house up in Belfast. They travel all over the country celebrating Mass. There is a great devotion to the faith among those who still actually practice their faith. It's very strong. But the vast majority of the population, and this is reflected, I think, in a lot of the political policies and such, the vast majority of the population, I don't think, take their faith seriously by any means, and they don't particularly practice it.
I mean, it seems to me, according to your numbers in your article, which we're going to link to, by the way, in our show notes today at thestationofthecross.com/ACT, I mean, it's just as bad in America, it seems to me, generally speaking. But one of the things that I found interesting in your article is you point out that prior to the pandemic, they were up. They had a 10-point lead prior to the pandemic on Sunday mass attendance, and then all of a sudden it got decimated because of the lockdowns, and then just people didn't come back. So it wasn't like it was great before. It was still not a good number before. But it's way worse now, which I think is true for pretty much most of the West, don't you think?
I'd say so. Ireland did have, out of all the European nations, Ireland did have, prior to the lockdowns, the highest mass attendance rate out of pretty much any European nation. I think maybe a couple like Poland might have rivaled Ireland, but they were noted for having the highest mass attendance rates, which were not terribly high to begin with. But you've had a couple of things. One thing was the clerical abuse scandal.
Yeah,
really, really rocked Ireland. And there's news about that that's still coming out. I still hear about that. I still read about that on, just you can hear about it on the radio, even, sitting on the bus. There's still news coming out about that, especially because there were so many Catholic boarding schools in Ireland. They've done TV documentaries and such about it. It really, really rocked the country. I think that partly because, for almost 100 years, you had such a conflation of kind of a political, cultural identity with the religious Catholic identity, because the two were so erroneously conflated and so closely intertwined. I think that a lot of people really lost their faith because it wasn't terribly strong to begin with. It was more a matter of being in a social or political club, and then you find out that all your priests have been doing these terrible things, hurting children in this way, and so you just leave. You say, I don't need to be part of that club anymore. And it's not a matter of maintaining faith. It's not a matter of remaining faithful to God, to your religion, to your religious beliefs. It's a matter of just, kind of swapping out of a social club, finding a new set of friends, so to speak. And that really rocked the country in a substantial way. And the impact, I think, is still felt over here.
Well, Ireland's also dealing with a lot of modern day problems the West is also facing, and that's, immigration, economics, and other issues. In fact, Conor McGregor was just at the White House yesterday trying to raise awareness. Have a listen.
Our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed. And
it wasn't on my bingo card, Sam McCarthy, that in 2025, the guy who lost to Floyd Mayweather, which should have never gotten in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, is going to be the leading voice in Ireland to try to bring about reform. What do we make of all of that?
Well, he was talking as late as 2023, or as recently as 2023, late in the year. He was talking about potentially running for president of Ireland, which I think it'd be really interesting to see. I don't know if he'd necessarily have the support or get the support that he needs, but he'd certainly, he's got the platform to bring enough prominence to a lot of these issues that he really obviously cares deeply about. I've never been, the biggest Conor McGregor fan, but, it is great to see somebody with that kind of platform and that kind of, social clout really bringing attention to these issues, because he's absolutely right. The immigration issue in particular is it's insane over here. I was even just with my grandmother. We were driving through a small town in Ireland, Cashel. It's not a major metropolitan area. It's a town, a small town, and she's pointing out an old retirement home, and she explains to me that the government forcibly removed the elderly Irish who'd been living there to house refugees, mostly Ukrainian,
Wow.
but you've got some from the Middle East, to house them in there. They didn't provide anything for, according to my grandmother at any rate, they didn't provide anything for the Irish who were removed. They didn't find somewhere else. They just said, hey, if you got family, go back to your family.
Really?
There was a big series of protests up in Dublin. They found that the government started housing grown adult men from the Middle East who claimed to be refugees, started housing them in a school for children without telling any of the parents. So one day the parents just
That's
find
bizarre.
that you've got all these Muslim men walking around, tousling their kids' hair. And they had no notification. They had no heads up, nothing. They had no warning on any of this. And so it sparked, some protests, and that just deepened. And then you had a series of stabbings. An Algerian immigrant stabbed 3 children and their teacher in Dublin, and it sparked riots. This was late 2023. This was
I remember.
Shortly, I think it was a day or two before Thanksgiving 2023. It stabbed 3 kids. The one child, she spent 9 months in intensive care in the hospital. Thank God, none of them died. But stuff like that has become more and more commonplace. In Limerick, which is half an hour, 35 minutes from me, the most popular birth name last year in Limerick was Mohammed. You've got the immigration issue is getting very much out of hand. And it's the slogan that the protesters use is Ireland is full. And that's
but
to a great extent, that's true.
The only answer is Christ, and Christ is King, Master of the whole world. A Jew or Gentile, doesn't matter. And yet it seems like that's not the message we're getting out of Ireland. In my humble opinion, the only way to turn things around is for the bishops to put on their mitres, grab their croziers, and go into the public square and preach Christ is King. And they don't seem to be doing that, are they?
No. They're not doing that. They're largely silent on most things. I'm in touch a lot with the communications office for the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Ireland. I get regular updates from them. It'll be, little emails about, on big feast days like St. Patrick's Day, I'll get an email, here's the Archbishop's homily for this week, or it'll be minor things. There's really no effort made at the Episcopal level to combat or to confront the rampant progressivism and degeneracy that's taking hold of the country. You even had an instance, there was Father, I'm going to forget his first name, but Father Sheehy, who was, he'd been in the U.S. for a little while, but he's, an Irish priest, and he was helping out while in retirement at a parish in Listowel up here, which is, again, not too far from me. Ireland's small enough that nothing's too far from me, really. But he was helping out at a parish up there, and in his homily, he talked about sin. And he called out, such things as homosexual acts and transgenderism and abortion, as he said, these are sins. And our society does not recognize them as such. Our society says that these are good things. They're protected rights. They're protected characteristics, whatever. They're not. They're sin. And we need to repent of that. We need to turn to Christ to heal us of our wounds. We need to turn to Christ to forgive our sins, etc. And his bishop silenced him publicly and officially censured him.
Well, there you go, folks. Christ is King. Tell the whole world, even if your bishops refuse to, you can still speak up. Sam McCarthy over at the Washington Stand. Grateful to have you on the team today. Let's going to pray for Ireland, pray for the whole West, because it seems it's a lost cause. But you are way more hopeful at the end of your article than I would be.
If you like this kind of content, I'd be super grateful if you would consider buying me a coffee. I'll put a link below, and on your way down, smash that subscribe and check out this video right here, because you're not going to want to miss anything.